I'm not sure, but I think my mother is possessed. Or maybe a witch. I don't know, and I'm not sure how it works. But she sleepwalks a lot at night, and she doesn't even realize it. As when I bring it up to her the next morning, zero recollection. I also don't think my dad realizes it either. Or he's too tired to care. As for me, I'm a light sleeper with sensitive hearing, and I can usually hear her feet on the rug as she moves about the house, opening and closing doors. Plus, our dog Mila started barking like crazy when my mother goes off on one of her midnight strolls. The first time this had come to my attention, it was by no fault of mine. She had been in my room, looking over me in a light pink gown that was obviously not meant for outside of bedroom activity, and she was absolutely caked in mud. I had woken up by chance and had nearly been frightened senseless. It was only by sheer luck and last-minute recognition of just who stood at my bed that I had not screamed my head off, sure to wake the entire neighborhood. Her eyes, they had been wide open, and she was mumbling things at such a fast pace that it sounded an entirely different language. Before I could fully wake up, she had left my room, mumbling towards the staircase. I was afraid she would tumble down the stairs and severely injure herself, so I quickly got out of bed and ran after her. I had heard about how dangerous it was to wake a sleepwalker, so I was just going to steer her safely back to her room. By the time I reached the staircase, she had already reached the bottom. I wondered how in the world she had gotten down so fast. She had even made it to the door and was busy unlocking it, although not gracefully. I knew if she had got out, she could really end up hurt. So I locked the door each time she unlocked it, and eventually led her back up the stairs and into her room. My dad barely even stirred. But I couldn't blame him. He worked late and was extremely tired each day he came back home. I made my way back to my room and noticed Mila was going nuts. I decided to peek out the window and find out why. She was livid and acting crazy, jumping into the air and snapping at some unseen entity, howling as she missed a target that seemed not to be there. She wasn't the only one. I could hear the other dogs in the neighborhood howling and going mad. I opened the window and called out to see what was wrong, and to hopefully stop the neighbors from calling the cops on us for noise at this hour. She wouldn't listen. She kept up this frenzy. I eventually gave up, hoping she would stop on her own and that we wouldn't get a complaint in the morning. The noise kept me up for over 2 hours, and then she and all the other dogs suddenly stopped barking, all at once. It was just completely silent. It was so sudden that I had to check to make sure I didn't spontaneously go deaf. I looked out my window and saw that she was still alert, but seconds after I noticed her, she paced in a circle as dogs do just before bed and just lay down and went to sleep. I didn't tell my parents any of this in the morning. I felt they already had enough things to worry about. The same events, though, repeated themselves the next night, and for several nights after. I had started to become anxious as I lost out on sleep, both from the noise of the dogs no one else seemed to hear, and from having to make sure my mom wasn't wandering around in the dark each night. I was beginning to feel like I was going to go as mad as the dogs. And then I noticed something. All the sleepwalking and the dogs losing it every night, they all seemed to begin at the same time. The barking and my mom's sleepwalking started mostly at 12:03 a.m. and stopped by 3:06 a.m. I'm not religious, and I'm pretty against the idea of coincidence. I find myself a pretty logical person, so I did what all logical people do. I did some research. I researched the times and I stumbled on an article about something called the witching hour. It is a time during the night when the veil between life and death is at its weakest, and ghosts, spirits, and evil can cross over into our world. So it was just a bunch of nonsense. Gotcha. But it still bothered me. I needed to know why those exact times. So I found the writer's information at the bottom of the article, and I sent them an email. The reply he sent back to me sounded exactly like I expected, and that it was just talking out of where the sun doesn't shine. They said the theory was that it was like a mockery of the Holy Trinity, just as demons are associated with an upside-down crucifix. The witching hour is a mockery of the death of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was nailed to the cross at noon, which is at 12 p.m., and he died 3 hours later, which puts the time at around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, which is the direct opposite of what the witching hour is supposed to be. I told them what was going on with my situation, and they told me the dogs may be seeing the spirits that are active at those times, which explains their barking and erratic behavior. Then, maybe somehow a spirit is possessing my mom. Yep, absolutely bonkers. I said thanks and went on my way to prepare for another night of lost sleep. My mom had a schedule she seemed to keep. She'd wake me up, mumbling nonsense from some corner of the room, eyes still bloodshot and widened beyond belief. She would then try to leave the house, then wander around the rooms till past 3, and then go back to bed. Nothing significant really happened with the sleepwalking. And then the day that traumatized me pretty bad. Really bad. We woke up to find out that Mila had been ripped in two in the backyard. The chain restraining her had been yanked out of the concrete block that held up our section of the fence, and the chain had been snapped cleanly in half. My mom had been crying for hours after that, wondering what kind of animal could have killed Mila. After all, we lived in a pretty woodsy area. Some kind of bear could come along and, well, have done the job. And that would have been what I had thought too. It's what I really wish I could believe. If I had not seen what would stick with me till the day I die, and turn my worldview on its head. My dad worked later than usual that night. I had woken up to the sound of barking and heavy growling. I checked my clock and realized it was way past the time my mom usually stood in my room. But my mom wasn't there. Mila continued to go berserk, and even more than usual, causing every dog in the neighborhood to once again do the same. I jumped out of bed, worried that my mom may have made it outside, and sprinted to the staircase. I looked down the landing at the front. The door was closed, and then I heard it. A shriek as if someone had left an old-time horror film on had come from the back of the house. The backyard. I bolted as fast as I could down the stairs to the open door and onto the back porch. As I stepped through the door, I saw her wide-eyed expression stare me down just from beyond the dim light casted by the house. She turned away from me, dramatically tumbled to the floor in a full-body drop, landing on her hands without hesitation, and started bear-crawling on all fours across the yard at a way too practiced pace, ending in somewhat of a feet-first backward somersault, and then coming to rest a few inches away from our frantic companion. I was about to chase her down until I saw this absurdly horrific and, to be honest, way too acrobatic display from a woman of my mother's station. And that hesitation may have saved my life, and spelled the end of my dogs. In the blink of an eye, faster than I can think, she yanked Mila off the floor by her chains, and dug her hands into my four-legged family member's stomach, to pull her apart in an explosion of viscera and a mist of blood that covered my mother as if splashed in a vibrant red paint, and yet somehow would not be present on her the next day. I stood there in shock, but as the blood dripped from my mother's gown, her head started to turn, and every primal instinct in me urged me back inside, where I locked myself in my room for the remainder of the night. This is the first time she was violent since she began sleepwalking, and I am terrified of what she might do to me or my dad unless I can find out how to stop this. So, with a scared heart and an open mind, I ask all of you, if you have any information on how, please help us, and wish us luck.